Kia ora, and welcome to another week of our AEC School Briefs. This week we are going to be doing a bit of a deep dive into what happened at the NZEI NZPF Hui that happened. You will have seen we posted about that online. We are, of course, going to touch on what's happening in the proposal, or now the confirmation, that to replace NCEA. And I think it would only be responsible to revisit the era of our Minister of Education sharing a National Party reel, because, it does actually have serious ramifications. But I will hand over to Liam to take us into our first part of the discussion.
Yeah, cool. And so we're really lucky to have Jason Miles, the president of the New Zealand Principals Federation, with us today, because alongside NZEI, we saw some real leadership from both NZPF and NZEI Te Reo, to bring. I know, what would you say, Jason? Almost the entire curriculum sector together for a kind of one-day hui.
Yeah, kia ora. Thanks for the opportunity to come in today. I've always wanted to do one of these substacks, so I'm learning as I go, but really appreciate the work that you are all doing. The day on Tuesday was a really important day. It had principals, teachers, associations, academics all in the same room together. So it was something like we haven't felt for a while, and it was in the absence of anything from the Ministry of Education to get us together that we felt it was really important that we were in the same room with an opportunity to discuss the draft Te Mātai Aho and the draft curriculum. So it was a really dynamic day.
So whose idea was it to bring it together? Was it a collective decision of the peak bodies? Was it sort of that organic, grounds up kind of organisation?
Yeah, so I met with Steph Mills over coffee and discussed the lack of opportunity to have a voice across all sectors, and we decided to canvass the appetite of our other peak bodies, and also made sure we included the subject associations so that we had their voice as well. And there wasn't one association or person that we contacted or group that didn't want to be there.
Yeah, and I know herding the sector into one room can be an absolute mission, but the fact that you did it and it sounded like there was some real willingness there, I think probably speaks to the level of concern that people have had mounting around the last 2 years of curriculum change. But even more impressive than getting people in the room was that you guys all committed to a joint statement and all parts to it. And I thought it might be useful just to kind of work through each of the four parts and just kind of talk about where it came from. I've got the letter up in front of me. The first one there is, I'll just read it out. The direction of national curriculum change, including the structure and content of the draft learning areas and framework of Te Mātai Aho, the New Zealand curriculum, and Te Mautanga or Aotearoa, currently out for consultation, does not honour Te Tiriti o Waitangi, nor does it support giving effect to Tiriti o Waitangi in our schools and kura.
Yeah, that was a big part of the conversation. Obviously, we're really concerned that the 2023 version of Te Mātai Aho has been dismantled. The work of Wayne Nata and his group has been turned on its ear from a cultural lens to a knowledge-rich and science of learning lens, and it's pretty much devoid of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. We want to make sure that our curriculum framework actually reflects what it should be to be living and learning in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and that whole framework document is such a key place for that to happen.
Do you know what's quite ironic is the fact that they've clung on to the Te Mātai Tahoe, that label, when the minister a number of times has said the reason why the new qualification framework has to have a new name is because it's departed so much from the original document. And it's interesting, isn't it? That rule doesn't apply across the board. Like, I think it's really disingenuous to keep that te reo name that was so powerful, and as you say, co-designed and led by Dr. Wayne Nata. Because it does feel like it's a bit of sort of cultural washing, brown washing, whatever you want to call it, by retaining that title even.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
it goes mind back 2.5 years when all of this was coming up. There was this absolute fear of the minister wanting to say that this was going to be a full rewrite of the curriculum, and we know that's where we have ended up. But she thought that given all of the kind of change, the sector wouldn't be able to handle that. So we were told it was like a refresh of the refresh, which is why they could hold on to these parts. I think it's also why we're on to our third version of the maths curriculum in as many years as well.
So that was the first one. What were the other three?
Well, one of the other ones, you want to read one of them out, Liam?
Yeah, the current process taken for curriculum development has not met the expectations of the sector in terms of engagement, consultation and co-design. As such, it's ignored the wisdom and input of young people, education experts including teachers, iwi, hapu, whānau, rather it's being driven by a narrow ideological interests of a small group.
So that was a huge point of discussion in the room as well. Like, I've been a principal for 30 years. Every curriculum rewrite or the new part of the curriculum has been established. We've all known who's held the pen. We've all known who's been in that room helping to shape the curriculum, making sure that it's experienced educators, academics, it's, research-based. But listen, we don't know who's in that room. And the rep we had on curriculum groups last year from NZPF had to sign NDAs. And that's just meant that person was in the room as an individual principal because she couldn't report back to NZPF to get the feedback of what's happening. She was increasingly frustrated that it was just an information sharing session rather than an engagement. So, New Zealand curriculum reform should be more organised and more inclusive of our experienced professional educators, and this is not the case. So that's where that statement came from. NZPF have got a solution for how it should be done, curriculum reform should be done, and that is a very clear, structured cross-party agreement based on international best practice. We've got 8 principles, LES, for that curriculum reform process, cross-party, and 7 practices. So, we're not just debunking it, we've got a solution going forward.
Yeah. Fantastic. And again, we've seen that weaponisation of NDAs, haven't we? We've said, we've heard it said it's to protect the writers because they don't want them to be targets. And it's just, again, disingenuous. And we're seeing it again in the secondary space where we're seeing a very big show of all these sector groups being formed that are going to be giving feedback. But you look at the timelines for the feedback.
Yeah.
It's a matter of weeks. You can get all the feedback groups together in the world, but if you're only going to give them a matter of weeks, it's really just a rubber stamping exercise, or some very high level feedback at best. So that's your first two. What's the third?
Sorry, those NDAs really wind me up as well. For me, it really drives at the heart of what it means to be a profession, to be able to robustly debate curriculum, and for governments, successive governments as well, although there's been a massive overuse under the current government, to get people to design them, really just wants to lock in a particular direction before it comes out for some kind of sham consultation at the end.
Yeah.
The third one, though, is one that I've been hearing lots about this week. The pace of curriculum change is unreasonable, has layered multiple demands on schools, and created a huge workload pressures on the sector. The sector has not been adequately resourced, nor has it been given enough time to consider to implement the expected change. This will have significant negative impacts, including the impact of recruiting and the retention of teachers.
Excellent.
Yeah, the whole pace of change of this curriculum reform is exorbitant. Like, we have come from a place where we were probably going too slow in the first iteration curriculum refresh, but at least we had our professional voice in the room. So we totally admit that curriculum refresh was going perhaps a little too slow. But what we've seen in the last 2 years is absolute curriculum reform on steroids, and
At
we're
pace.
at pace. Yeah, that's right, and it's been overwhelming for our sector to have a English and Maths curriculum presented to the sector on October 19 one year, and then to have it mandated in December for implementation by January is.
No, it's a joke.
I cannot even comprehend who has given the minister that advice. And then to throw out assessment tools and reporting tools and link it to ERO reports to in that short time frame where the profession is just trying to learn about the new curriculum, it's just crazy.
No, it's bonkers. It's bonkers, and I can't help feeling like there's an element of it being by design. Keep us busy, keep us so you struggle to find people with the energy to engage anymore, and fight back, because we are absolutely overwhelmed at the rate of change. I heard the minister talking the other day about with the upcoming NCA changes. We've got the new curriculum now, and then next year they're going to go up to the next level, and it's just like, hello, we've only got English and Maths, and it's the first year ever in 2026. We haven't even got the other curriculum out. And you're saying that that's setting them up for doing a brand new curriculum in 2 years' time. And it's not even making sense. But what we see, I don't know if you've noticed the last couple of days, it feels like they're ramping up, and the minister in particular, ad nauseum, reels that are selling. And they're like the one in the school, a stand-up, one where it's a direct-to-camera. And it's like, oh, my goodness, like standardization with a side of steak knives. We're getting bamboozled by the pace of change, but we're also getting bamboozled by the marketing of education at the moment. We have a government who is marketing their changes to their parents and voters and don't really seem to give a damn what the educators actually think about it.
Yeah, and it gets a bit worse than that because that just further compounds on teachers and principals who can't keep up with the change because you sense what's going on in education as if it's just a switch that you can turn on.
Yeah.
And so if you think about the announcements parents have been told that we've got this new world-leading, knowledge-rich curriculum, and we know full well that schools are coming to terms with that. There's still lots of old curriculum stuff going on because it's time to do the stuff. We've been told that there is this new smart tool that is going to instantly make their kids smarter. And we all know well that we're in this kind of year where actually you don't have to commit to it. And by and large, I'm not coming across a huge number of schools that want to be early adopters. And then the ERO reports that are going to give parents all this information so they can go and choose the best school within the area. And the reports aren't even out yet. And so there seems to be this kind of mismatch between what the minister is telling parents education looks like and what's actually going on. And it's teachers and principals that are kind of holding the bag.
She definitely hasn't heard of that mantra that you under promise and over deliver.
I mean, you talk to experienced teachers, and for them, they just kind of see us in this kind of like same cycle of the curriculum isn't actually going to take because anytime you try and ram it through.
And then when there's issues around efficacy, it's going to be held up as evidence that clearly the teachers need more simplification. They need more scripts to tell them what to do. And it's like, it's absolutely...
I think you're
go on.
Your description of a very clever marketing campaign. It's exactly what it feels like. It feels like political overreach, statements to voters rather than to educators.
It's just she's the minister of spin, and we're stuck in the spin cycle. It's like it's not very pleasant. Sorry, carry on, Liam. It's the next one.
How quickly all of those backbench national MPs share any type of Facebook?
That's never happened before, eh? That is a new phenomena.
Well, I mean, I think it speaks to the fact that they don't feel like they can go out and talk about the work they've done around the cost of living or dealing with the fuel crisis,
No.
are looking at kind of education, because the minister has crafted quite a coherent narrative for parents. It just kind of lacks any substance.
Yeah.
Cool. And the last one on the letter, as they stand, the current draft curriculum documents and framework are not fit for purpose and do not meet the ministry's own stated standards. They represent a profound narrowing of curriculum scope, which in many cases is unworkable in particular education settings.
I guess the big narrative is around the year by year and the removal of
Because you've got
understand.
multi-level classes, composite classes in a lot of schools, haven't you?
Yeah, we did a NZPF survey. We got 380 responses from our principals, predominantly from primary schools. We asked, how many of you have got composite classes this year? And 93% came back saying yes. So that's about 350 of the 380. So when you look at the draft curriculum in science or social science, and you see the year 3, the year 4, the year 5 expectations and knowledge rich statements that have to be taught, they're not in any way connected or
No, like we'd usually level up within the same context and
yes,
topic, wouldn't we?
we would. Yeah. So we would have a topical context, and we'd have different levels of learning and opportunities within those year levels. But now there are totally different statements for year 3, and then year 4, year 5. We have our rural schools who might have all 8 year levels in their classroom. But a lot of urban schools, like my school, Kaipui North School, we've got a roll of 500, and we have composite classes from year 2 up, because of the way that helps you structure the school. So the whole framework of those draft curriculum are unworkable.
It's absolutely bonkers.
Where to from here, Jason? I mean, couple of questions. What if there are organisations out there that want to kind of jump on board? Well,
individual teachers. I've had a number of teachers when I've shared it on the social media that would love to know how. I wish I could have been there. How can I get involved? What's going on? So, what's the opportunity?
Yeah, well, I'm meeting with Steph Mills and her team from NZEI on Monday, and we're going to do a review of all of the information that came out from participants, and then work on our next steps. So, yeah, we will be making them clear, and also, talking to all of our principals across New Zealand about how we can band together and continue to make sure that the consultation, the small, tiny window that we have, is utilised, and the message is very clear.
Yeah, and I think if you can find a mechanism for our collective educators to have their voice heard meaningfully, they'd really appreciate it. Because I think so much of the frustration is that, we're encouraging everyone to get behind the consultation, but feeling like it doesn't really go anywhere. So we need to do both and, don't we? We need to do the official consultation, but we also need to find those mechanisms for ensuring everyone feels like they can have their voices heard in a safe way. Like I sort of feel like in the secondary space, and particularly in the leader space, I get contacted by a number. I can sound like Erica. People have emailed me. Got a phone call this morning. No, but I have conversations with a number of principals who, they're afraid to come out. They're afraid to come out publicly and critically. So the only safe way for most of our educators and leaders to do this is to do this collectively and have that sort of safety and a bit of a united front and a united voice.
Yeah, it's very very true that they're a lot of afraid to come out, and that's due to the other high stakes environments that the minister is setting up outside of curriculum. You look at the Curriculum Reform Amendment Act, and the fact that we are likely to have the Secretary of Education writing our professional standards, and then those high stakes ERO reports, which we're going to have the principal's name on the back. We've
and their experience in the years that they've been there.
We've managed to encourage the chief executives of ERO to remove that now, but that was a shock to see that level of, I guess, indoctrination of, the work of the minister.
Yeah. I mean, the only way they've been
Yeah.
able to move this quickly is that they're not kind of building this from the ground up. They're literally just copying and pasting it out of what's going on in the UK.
And parts of Australia is the other one. Like, the sort of it. So, like, if it's not UK, it's, you know,
Mm,
they grab and drop in the stuff in
mm,
Australia. So that's really exciting, Jason. So people need to stand by. There's going to be
yep,
opportunities to get more engaged and get involved and support that work. It's super
mm,
exciting. And that takes us to the next announcement we had this week, which was in some ways a non-announcement. We didn't get a whole lot more information. We had it confirmed that the proposal to replace NCA with a NZ Certificate of Education was going to go ahead. I actually think people need to be really careful. I think they need to look at the announcements and they need to listen. There's a whole lot of Easter eggs and red flags in those announcements as to what's coming. I think this announcement was very light on detail and very high level by design. A, I don't think they've nutted out the details yet. But B, there was stuff in there that should really, really worry us as educators.
mm,
There was this sort of talk of the fact that we're going to have very locked down standards and subjects that are going to ensure that every young person is learning the same thing in every school, and every young person is going to be assessed against the same thing, i.e., that whole subject, and you have to do the whole subject as it is. And the trouble is, some of that stuff sounds quite reassuring when it's just talked about at a high level. I think what can be really tricky is that people don't realise it's a fundamental shift in how we deliver education here in New Zealand. And my biggest frustration is I shared yesterday a screenshot from John Hattie's 2008 NCEA study, which actually discovered that the new approach to assessment, NCEA, was by far a better indicator of students going to university and how they were going to do in their first year of university. And in fact, globally, it was recognised as one of the best indicators of how students go beyond school. And I'm constantly frustrated by this flip-flop of throwing out entire systems when we know that there are just simply issues within NCA that could be fixed. There are problems with potentially too much flexibility and too much being able to cobble together qualifications. There is a lack of trust. There could be elements of it that we could make easier to understand. But none of that requires throwing out an entire secondary English, qualification framework and building a new one from the
mm,
ground up. The only reason you would do that is because you completely want to change how we deliver teaching and learning and assessment in the senior school. And I think people should be very wary. And the fact that we're expecting that stuff to be written in a matter of weeks by
mm.
some contracted, like, I'm thankful, don't get me wrong, I'm thankful that we've got contracted local educators and experts involved in the writing of it, but they are doing it part-time in a matter of weeks.
Mm.
Claire, can
It's
you
not good enough.
flesh out the kind of like why and the where we're going that sits behind this? Because at a kind of surface level, there's almost some kind of rose-tinted glasses around a kind of end-of-year exam and you getting an
Oh,
ABC.
absolutely.
Kind
So,
of,
so the argument was that NCEA was too flexible and was being gamed. There was an argument there that there was not consistent marking going. There's a lack of trust of the amount of internal assessment and teacher judgment that takes place in a high stakes assessment, and that meant that you couldn't be confident that the levels were the same across the country. There was the sense that there wasn't any guarantee of whole subjects and all students coming through with the same qualification and the same knowledge. And then there was this ridiculous argument about parents not understanding NCEA. And that was as simple as it was a different language than they had at school. And actually, we know the parents coming through now, half of them went through, we're starting to have the parents that went through NCEA themselves. It's such a non-argument. And then we have the minister standing up and saying that there was a really high level of support for the change in the consultation. Let's be clear, at no point in the consultation were we directly asked if we support the removal of NCEA. There was this absolutely terrible dynamic consultation platform where they had a first question when they made a whole lot of lofty statements about why they were changing NCEA. And then the question you were asked was, do you believe a national assessment should assess the curriculum?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course I do.
Yep.
And and I remember going, how am I going to fill this in properly to actually say what I mean? Like, there was no way, as someone who was really critical and really wanting us to think really carefully about this, there was no way for me to communicate my critical discourse apart from in the comments. It was actually impossible. So we've actually been played. We've been completely played. And yes, NCEA wasn't perfect. It was well overdue for a refresh. It was well overdue for a refine. There is absolutely mechanisms and ways that we can tighten up internal assessment. There was an OECD paper out at the beginning of this year in January that looked at national senior qualifications around the world and made a series of recommendations. Their recommendations, for the most part, are in line with NCEA as it is, with a bit of tightening up. They say that there shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all. They said there should be a mixture of internal and external. If we can't look to OECD and a international best evidence synthesis and learn from that, I'm really worried. Instead we look to Nick Gibb and we,
But I mean, that shows.
lift Jan Plonkin and probably a very English approach.
I mean, I think that goes to show the absolute disregard that the government does have for some of those international organisations, because
absolutely.
they will only sign up to them when they give them the answer that they wanted right from the beginning.
They love to wheel up PISA, don't they? And that's an OECD qualification, and that's what we've had a lot of. Like, people, I've had discussions to go, but we've had declining rates. And I went, what? Tell me what declining rates you mean. And of course they're just taking headline statements. I said, are you talking about PISA results? That's really complex. I said we had really minimal uptake of PISA in New Zealand for the last few years, 4 years actually. And we know we're not a country that teaches to that test. The schools that do well at PISA, the countries that do well at PISA are the schools that teach their kids to do well at PISA and do well at testing. And we have topped the tests around creativity. We're identified for our creative thinking and how we're supporting our young people to be creative thinkers. And we're just about to kill any creativity in our and our junior curriculum, senior curriculum, and our senior qualification framework. It's absolutely gutting.
Gosh, it sounds like somebody needs to create some type of a 2-day conference, maybe based in Auckland,
Don't they?
and bring people together to talk about a long-term bipartisan blueprint.
I think that's the only answer, Liam.
Yeah.
The last one that we were going to talk about was Erica Stanford's human error of sending out to all principals in the country just straight up National Party propaganda from their own YouTube channel.
Yeah, the big issue there, firstly, Liam.
Oh, we've lost Jason. He's suddenly frozen.
And he was about to make a really
I know. I actually put it down to someone's office, intercepted.
That's right. Yeah.
We'll see if hopefully he'll come back to us at
What
some
was your
stage.
take? What was your take on the video going out?
He's coming. He might come back.
On the video going out, because I don't know, she seemed at pains to kind of talk about this as a one-off, but I don't know.
Oh, and you do know what I mean? I think it's actually a sign of when you're so busy producing like dozens of reels and artifacts to push out a day, wouldn't it be easy to get mixed up? I mean, I think this is actually a symptom of an approach that is prioritizing spin and marketing over depth of thinking and taking time to do things well. When you're working that quickly, you are going to make mistakes. And actually, all our minister did was demonstrate the dangers of working too quickly.
Now, that is a glass half full version. I mean, there is another version where they did want that out on the National Party channel because they wanted the National Party algorithm blocking into the YouTube feeds of principals in the country that went and clicked on the video.
And it's not okay.
But I mean, this has been a government that has kind of constantly skirted around the line of kind of proper transparency. I mean, this was the same minister that was doing ministerial work through her personal Gmail account,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and
Oh,
trading.
I think if you're, I often think of that idea of Icarus when you fly too close to the sun. Someone that becomes that confident and stops thinking, like it's. I liken it, really, really popular authors over time start writing thicker and thicker stupid books because they end up having more ownership of what they're writing, and the editors stop having an impact. I think we're seeing the outcome of someone who doesn't think they need critical expert advice. There's a bit of a sense of we've got this. We've got this. You guys are getting in the way. Stop slowing me down. I've got the answer, and I'm going to hit my KPIs,
I've
and
read
we're
a
going to
book.
improve all the tests are going to go up, and we're going to have won. And I think what we're seeing is endemic of a system and someone who actually doesn't believe they need critique and support and information.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, we have run well over time.
We have.
And so, yeah, and you've got a very busy week ahead of you. So let's pull the pin here. Still lots more that we could have spoken about, but I think that's just the
Absolutely.
nature of education right now. And
Yeah.
so, thanks very much for coming along. It's a shame that we've lost Jason, but it was really nice to hear an example of
Fantastic having another voice.
leaders coming together to push back in powerful ways. And so, have a good week, and we'll catch you next weekend.
Ka kite.